You're listening to Maximum Medicine Radio with host Doc Martin. Stay tuned in or call in. You won't want to miss what's happening next. How do you step into your maximum potential? How do you connect your spiritual drive with your physical path? Stick around as Doc Martin takes listeners on a journey through the seen and unseen, the accepted and the unbelievable. Get ready to meet the maximum you the world needs on Maximum Medicine Radio with Doc Martin now. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Doc Martin. This is Maximum Medicine Radio. My guest tonight is Sarah Grace, who's an intuitive and a clairvoyant. And what I love about it when I get, you know that expression, just get out of your own way. When I get out of my thinking head and I'm just in the flow, then either on Facebook or Instagram or something, somebody shows up in my field. And then I look into that person and I find, wow, what gifts they have. Wouldn't that be great to have them on the show? Because, you know, I'm all about the maximum we can be as humans. And our intuitive side in medicine is often neglected. So I stumbled. Well, stumble isn't the right word. Somehow I think I get guided to land on these spots. And I met through the cyberspace, I met Sarah, and then I was so intrigued because she'll tell you, here is this intuitive clairvoyant, and she worked as a paramedic in California, so that's got to be busy. So how does a person like this have these gifts and use them in very human and probably situations we wouldn't think have any intuitive sense to them at all? But anyway, everybody, welcome to Sarah Grace. Hi, Sarah.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so happy you're here because, well, I'm always envious of people who have these incredible intuitive gifts. And from everything I can see that I've read about you and talked briefly, you do. So what sorts of things do you have as talents? And how old were you when you knew them, or you thought maybe something was going on? Tell me a little bit about that background.
My background is that my abilities came on at age 7. My strength is clairvoyance, so seeing, and then feeling, and then knowing, and both precognition and claircognition, and seeing dead people, mediumship. So I kind of have the whole gamut. But I
Mhm.
grew up in South Dakota in the middle of nowhere, pre-internet, and I was raised in a very volatile situation. And so I just woke up one day and I could see colors around people. And it progressed over a couple of weeks to feeling people's feelings and knowing their thoughts or what they were going to do, to eventually being able to see disease in people's bodies, and then on to seeing dead people. And like there's a lot of native culture there, so ancestral spirits. Now I'm just a kid. I have no idea what's going on. I don't, I'm thinking this is hopefully going to go away because it was very distracting and overwhelming. And when I finally said something to a member of my family, unfortunately, I was shamed and condemned. And they told me that if I talked about it, that I'd be sent away to a loony bin. And so that really kind of began my own personal odyssey of fear and shame around my abilities.
Was there, when you think back, was there events? And where the background of this is, I have noticed that there are some people who write books, they have an incredibly traumatic event, and boom, out of that, the window opens to the unseen world. So
That's
when you were 7, did you have events that tossed you into a new way of seeing?
realistically, the entirety from birth to age 16 was one long succession of violence, like very extreme violence. So there was not one unilateral experience for me as much as kind of many experiences. But I've also heard that a lot of times if somebody gets a knock to the noggin or a concussion, all of a sudden their psychic abilities open up, right? So I can't point to any one because I got many.
I'm sorry about that.
A
I
great
love, I
book.
love how you have soared out of that
Thank you.
and pulled together some incredible talents and gifts out of what could have been the worst PTSD ever.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. And now, all of these years later, I really understand that it was part of being forged in the fire, if you will.
Mhm.
Having access to this much data and information and going into people's innermost traumas and psyche um, is requires a lot of integrity, responsibility, and understanding. And so through going through a lot of personal trauma, addiction spirals, going through all of the things that I've personally gone through, and then repeatedly pulling myself up by my bootstraps, leaning into healing, changing behaviors, taking accountability, being open to learning and shifting, that has ultimately gotten me to where I am now, which is thriving with these abilities. So thank you for that.
Mhm. You know, I also think about, they talk about the wounded healer. And when you have experienced it, seen it, felt it, it really does allow you a resonance with your client and an understanding that perhaps no other healer could bring to the table.
1,000%. People can feel when you've been there. You know, it's a genuine experience. It's a lived experience. I don't have to guess because I've been there. And then I like to share from personal firsthand experience of like, well, these are the things I tried, and here's some other stuff that's possible too. So it definitely bridges that gap.
Mhm. Well, I want to be sure I tell the listeners, Sarah is an intuitive and a clairvoyant, and she will, um, if you call in, she will give you her hits on what she sees or feels. If you want to call, we are a live call-in show, and that's 1-800-930-2819. Or if you're watching on Facebook, if you put it in the comments, and then Emily, as our producer, will see those comments on Facebook and bring those to our attention as well. So join us, because this is you have a unique opportunity to have someone really see you in the most healing and loving of ways. So I invite you to call.
Mm.
But so, Sarah, the thing that also strikes me is you have a real core deep, soul deep understanding of PTSD.
Mhm.
Do you work with PTSD clients? Tell us about that.
Oh, all the time. Yeah. So my experience was that I went through and I was in denial of my gifts for a long time until I became a paramedic. And then I started using my gifts on 911 calls, which I'm sure we'll talk more about. Fast
Mhm.
forward all these years, and I've studied in all these different modalities, and I specialize in medical intuition and psychic surgery now. And with that, I have done 15 to 20, going on almost 20 years now of my own inner trauma work, shadow work, and integration. So being that I've done my own fair share of work, I think I'm attracting that, plus being a paramedic and being able to go into those really intense spaces. I
Mhm.
naturally attract people who have gone through significant traumatic events or have addiction programs or patterns, or maybe they're really sensitive and gifted and they don't know how to navigate, right? So I work with those types of people all the time. Yeah.
You know, I've come to realize, so it's probably been, gosh, 25 years since I got out of residency. And, you know, in medical school and then residency, you're very much taught by the book. Things are by the book. And then I moved out to South Central Pennsylvania after residency in a very rural area, 14,000 people in the county, first female doctor. And really can see that healing is not by the book.
Mm.
This science doesn't have all the answers. Of course, that's what this whole show is about, is that medical science doesn't have all the answers. but I have really started to understand that there are, and you can talk a little more about this, there are people who have these intuitive gifts and these sensory abilities. And sometimes the world is overwhelming. You
Most of,
know, you
oh
go
my God.
ahead.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Most of the time. It is so much having all of this sensory bombardment. And so here I thought I was this lone weirdo all those years, and now I understand upwards of 15 to 20% of the world's population is sensitive, and that's almost 1.6 billion of us. And there's a spectrum, really, and being sensitive, a high sense perception, or an ultra sensitive, or an empath, all kind of synonymous with really delicate and finely attuned nervous systems. And that nervous system is just trying to navigate so much sensory input. And then it goes with the hormones and throws everything off, and it just
Mhm.
will cascade. And it can be a lot to live like this. For so many years, I felt victimized by it. I felt, punished, and I didn't want anything to do with it. I just wanted it to stop and to go away. But once I began to really, it started with taking responsibility. I had tried and tried and tried for it to go away through all of these different modalities, or, drinking, or, drugs, or whatever I was up to, just trying to have a sense of like semblance of safety and understanding. And when I finally decided, hey, you know what? That sucks. That's not working. Um, this is how it is for me. It sucks. A lot of times I wouldn't wish this on anyone because it's so much all the time. But then I was like, what am I going to do about it? Well, I'll get educated, and I'll start understanding what each of the abilities are and how they navigate in the system, and how I can work with them, and then what I need to do to ground, to hydrate, to all the things. And so it is absolutely overwhelming oftentimes. And I'm a living example that you can be a very ultra sensitive and still thrive. It's really just learning how to kind of drive your apparatus, so to speak. When I got in there, I had no idea. There's all these levers, there's all these buttons. There's nobody to teach me how to use all of this stuff. And so I've been spending all these years kind of out here forging my way through the forest, and finally learned, like, okay, this is how it is for you, and this is what you do with it. And so, yeah, just because you're sensitive, if you're out there listening, you're not destined to a life of feeling crappy or overwhelmed.
Mhm.
You can actually feel really empowered with this.
One of the most important things I learned when I studied shamanism, gosh, easily 15 or more years ago, was understanding the energy body and then understanding boundaries. Man, did I see how many interactions in the day where you, even without your complete conscious awareness, are merging with someone else's energy fields, not always in a good way. And how to, I see that a lot. I'll just share this understanding in people who are very helper oriented, very caretaker oriented. But oftentimes when I look at it, I see this murky mess where it's not clean boundaries between one person and the other. And next thing I know, there's going to be a problem. So for me, when I think about somebody who is so incredibly open and receives so much data that the rest of us don't all receive or are blind to, that's a lot of, you need that protection, don't you?
Yes, it's both. It's going to be both protection, and then it grows into self-empowerment. In the initial phases, and I would say most sensitives or empaths are kind of, we fall in that codependent caretaker role, man. It's like, because it's so easy for us to help people, And so
Mhm.
learning about boundaries
And but you feel it so intensely, you resonate with it so intensely.
so
That,
deeply.
right. That, of course, when you're that merged, just because you're so aware, you would be like all of a sudden, getting swallowed up.
Yeah, because it's like I can see people's fields or feel what they're feeling as easily as I can see the color of the shirt they're wearing, right? And so to me, it's discernment. But in the initial phases of someone who's learning to become empowered with their sensitivities, that will be ground bubble protect. So learn how to ground your field, and then you can play with, kind of you can imagine yourself in a hula hoop, and anything inside the hula hoop is yours and anything outside is everybody else's, and nothing can come in. And there's all of the ways to clear the aura and run the chakras and stuff like that. Ultimately, though, I did that for quite a few years. And ultimately, I was like, all right, I'm tired of doing this. There's got to be something else. And I was intuitively guided to start filling up my auric field with my essence. Because by this stage, like I know who I am, I know what I feel like, I know what I do.
Mhm.
And so I can fill up my field. And so we go from a defensive to an offensive, which is hugely empowering, because then when I'm going to Costco or Target or whatever, I'm not like shrunk back trying to protect myself. Instead, I just fill up my auric field and just set the container, and anything that does not resonate just naturally bounces off. So I like to give that as kind of a stepping stone to where, it's just easier.
So it's really about owning your space. And when you're, and I think maybe, tell me if this is right, when you are very finally tuned in and at one with your energy field, when you have self acceptance, when you have the pride you get in knowing who you are, then you can have your energy field, you own it all the way out to the boundary you set. And you're right, nothing, then it's like nothing's coming in.
Mm. And it's so much less work, which is amazing. It just takes time to, uh, like you said, it's acceptance, because there's a coming to terms with process that most of us sensitives have, whether it's um, religious or family, like upbringing and belief structures, or fear, or not just wanting to fit in, or not wanting to be judged as weird or whatever. So, a lot of times people kind of hem and haw about coming to terms with. So that in and of itself is its own process. And when we finally say, okay, this is how I am, what do I do? That's a big
Mhm,
step
mhm.
forward. And then from there, we can learn about becoming grounded, and we can learn about the energetic bodies that you speak of, and what are each of the gifts, and how does it present to you? And the more that we play with those types of things, the more it becomes second nature, right? And the easier it gets. But it's like learning a new language. So for anybody who's just starting out and, just now coming to terms with, just know, like, go easy, and just think of it like you're learning literally a new language. And it just takes practice, like time and repetition.
What I loved about when I was studying shamanism, what I loved about it was having allies with power animals. And my first big helpers were the jaguars. And my second, and these guys like blew the jaguars out of the water, were the dragons. But when I was able to build a relationship with them, I think until I grew my own self confidence, those energies filled the field. They filled it out to the boundary.
Well said.
Um, and then I think I got more and more confident to where they may be energies that I have at my side, ready to help, but they're not filling the space for me.
Yeah, well, that's very well said, because it can be precarious learning. It's again, because when we're navigating energetics and learning the topography of kind of the subtle fields and the quantum, it can be good to
Mhm.
have backup. I have a huge lion and two dragons. So yeah, that's how I survived South Central, Los Angeles. Yeah. Mhm.
Say that again because I'm liking the synchronicity. You
Oh,
have,
I have a huge lion as a totem.
Okay.
And he's usually pretty chill unless I get into a situation that requires kind of more of an aggressive energy. And then I've got two dragons. So the dragon energy I'm very familiar with. And initially I used to be scared of them, but over time, similar to you, I've studied a lot of shamanism and plant medicine work,
Mhm.
and I became accustomed to and familiar with them, and ultimately befriended them and then learned to ride them ultimately, which is really, really
Mhm.
fun, where we can get into that place of understanding that energy and the potency of it. So I love what you're saying.
Um, so I have my Jaguar is really a tawny Puma type. Um, and he used to be ready to take on all comers because I was scared a lot in the world. Um, the dragons now for me are the realm of magic where you can bring in an alchemical shift to a situation that you can they're masters of creation and manifestation for me. So I can ask for guidance on how do we take this worldly situation and bring something into it that nobody expected, and make it a higher, more beneficial outcome. So for me, that's a thrill to have energies like that to talk to and get guidance from. And
That's
so
so beautiful. Yeah.
so tell me, I want to hear about paramedic. But I don't want to miss having you tell the listeners how to reach you because you have classes and you obviously guide clients through these troubled waters. So tell me about that. How can people reach you? How do you operate in the world?
You can reach me at sarahkgrace.com, and that's Sarah with an H, kgrace.com. I work with clients both in one-on-one session and it worldwide now via Zoom, doing medical intuition and psychic surgery. So it's essentially helping people kind of pull people out of the ditch and get them all energetically triaged and stabilized. It's like roto-rooting and pressure washing people for a living. It's really beautiful. And then most importantly, giving them a 3 to 6 month curriculum or program so they feel empowered, they know what to do next. So that's what I do in my one-on-ones. I've also got the Grace Place, which is a beautiful online community of supportive, energetically sensitive people. So if you're coming to terms with your gifts and you're working through some trauma, it's a beautiful community there. So plus, all the stuff with courses and
Hmm.
meditations and books and all the things. Yeah. So Journey into Grace, Tales of a Psychic Paramedic is my first book, and it's actually in contract to become a scripted television series. So we got a
Wonderful.
lot of great things happening. It's just time collectively. There's more and more of us that are not waking up, we're just remembering, being like, okay,
Mhm.
what do we hear? How do we navigate all the sensitivities and all the high sense perceptions? So we're definitely stronger together. So sarahkgrace.com.
Perfect. Thank you. Tell us, how did you end up as a paramedic? And when you think back on it, were you drawn to that, do you think?
I was drawn every time an ambulance would go by, my intuition would be like, do that. But I was really scared of it because I was like, what? I could kill people. I don't know how to do that. I didn't understand the training and how long it took to become a senior level medic and all of the things. So I grew up in the Midwest, and then I kind of romped around doing all kinds of crazy things, just trying to like find a sense of purpose and identity, but a lot of school of the hard knocks and a lot of just kind of bottoming out. And finally I just surrendered and was like, all right, well, I got nothing else to lose. I'll just go to EMT school because I was just being guided and drawn. So finally I
Mhm.
just quit resisting, like, all right, whatever. So I went to the UCLA EMT program. And then I went down into South Central Los Angeles, is where I started my 911 career in Compton, Inglewood, Carson, Hawthorne, that whole area. And it was very, very busy. And what ended up happening over time was mind you, I was still heavily closeted at this point, right? I was still not willing to talk about my abilities, but they just started working through me on these calls. And it was nothing I was trying to do, but my experience would be very matrix like. So as soon as I would get out on scene, everything would expand and crystallize into fractals. It would slow down and go silent. I would know 2 or 3 paces ahead what was going to happen. I always knew death because my tell for death was tasting metal. And I was the paramedic who was always there for death almost every shift. And then I began to notice kind of this really beautiful organized symphony in chaos. And so that I can take you through a number of different death experiences and what I actually saw. But it became this really beautiful experience and eventually led me to finally accepting that I am like this and then becoming educated on my abilities.
So, what have you seen and what do you now know is at the moment of death and just beyond?
There's there's as many ways to die as there are to live, and there's nothing to fear in death. It's like taking off a heavy coat. So our society is collectively taught to fear and to bubble wrap and to like try really hard to avoid the inevitable. Like all of us guaranteed 100% is going to die at some point. But are we going to live? That's the real question. And after seeing so many being on, thousands of 911 scenes, and hundreds of deaths where people just got up and they were just going about their day and they didn't realize it would be their last. It really drove it home to me, like what matters, right? And it really is about living life now.
Do you think, when you look back on it, do you think you had a role in helping people cross over?
Very much so. I became really like a midwife. And so my experience is this: in a medical death, say it's an expected hospice death, that's going to be different presentation for the person who's dying than a
Mhm,
traumatic death. So in a
mhm,
medical death, say you're just, in hospice, you're in your bed, your family's been there, it's been a few days or weeks or months or whatever. The auric field expands out and the quote veil thins. And so we've all heard of these NDE experiences or people that are end stage starting to see and talk to deceased loved ones. And it's because the veil is thinning, and the veil is going to be the egoic infrastructure of the 5 senses, right? That keeps our little bubble intact of the human paradigm. So that thins out and they are able to astral travel. They're going to be able to start to see their deceased loved ones. And at that stage, in the moments of death, then we know the heart stops and agonal respirations. And what I would always see would be the chakras would start to release from the base of the spine, and they would unfurl like ribbons going
mhm.
up through the crown. And it was really fascinating to watch because sometimes it would happen very quickly and sometimes it was more slow, but every time was orchestrated in the exact same fashion. And so I knew that there was something bigger energetically or intelligence wise that was kind of driving this apparatus, so to speak, because in each death experience, the energetics and the algorithm of what I would be witnessing was very similar. But they would come out the crown of the head to the awaiting deceased loved ones or relatives or pets or religious archetypes, and they'd be having their little reunion up in the corner, right? And
Mhm.
we'd be doing pronouncement or whatever we were doing with the coroner or whoever. So that's the medical death. The trauma death is a different deal because, it's really jarring and abrupt. 1 second you're in your body, the next you're not. And I would see this every single morning. So my experience with those guys is we'll say it's a car accident. And so we come on scene and the person's dead in the car, but I can see the soul, which looks like their body except translucent, so I can see through them. And they're standing next to the body, next to the car, and they're like looking around like, the heck's going on here? Totally befuddled, right? Because again, 1 second they're in Starbucks drive-through, the next they pull out and they get T-bone and that's it. And they don't know how to make sense of that. So telepathically, I was able to see, and that they could see that I could see them. And ultimately, I developed kind of a protocol where I'd just be like, all right, you're in a car accident, you're dead. We're going to pull your body out of the car. We're going to start CPR and take you to the hospital. And so I'm rapid fire communicating telepathically to give that soul a semblance of understanding as to what was happening. The whole time, like, we would be working on the physical body and getting it out of the car and doing what we needed to do. The other big difference in a trauma is that almost always there was an angel that would appear at the moment of death. And a celestial, to me, is just a frequency of consciousness, and it's just pure love. It is just the most exquisite, calm love. And I would experience it more as a light being, kind of androgynous. I didn't see like wings or flowy. It was more just this tall, statuesque light being, but it just emanated, it blanketed everything with silent love. And so here's the person trying to climb back in their body or trying to like figure out what the heck's going on. And all of a sudden they turn and they see this exquisite love. And ultimately I would watch them merge and then disappear from view. And so those were my two experiences between, and I saw this hundreds and hundreds of times. So in medical versus trauma, I noticed those two differences. But I have to tell you, what an honor to be present, to be able to like assist and facilitate and witness. Like, I always thought that was such a gift and an honor to be part of.
I remember telling one of my professors from residency after I'd been working in solo practice for a while and going into the hospital to see patients and saying, the most powerful moments in my interaction with patients is when you're sitting on the edge of the bed and they're about to die. There is a connection that transcends any other connection I ever had with the people.
Absolutely.
And it's a powerful moment.
One of the, yeah.
Like really seriously big. And, you know, if you can guide the person to at least stop and review, so many people, they don't even have, when they go to die, they don't have forgiveness. They don't have, they don't have the knowing to tell their family how much they love them and to try and, offer to them, this might be a good time for you to think about this kind of thing. Doesn't always work. There are people who leave the earth grouchy, serious,
Many.
seriously grouchy, without any forgiveness, still angry at a family member. That's heartbreaking, I think. But so I want to remind the listeners, Sarah will do a reading. She is an intuitive, a clairvoyant, and she does see auric fields. So if you want to call 1-800-930-2819, or if you write a comment in the Facebook, if you're watching on Facebook, and then Emily will tell us what you want to know or tapping in. So, but Sarah, take us now. You're also a healer. You're a teacher. And you're guiding people, especially those you've been through PTSD and you are on the Thrive side now. But you're also a healer. How do you said you're a clairvoyant first, but over the years you've probably developed your other skills. Where do you tell me in general, where do you go when you go as a psychic surgeon? Is there a plane you go to? Is there a thread of consciousness you connect to? Maybe I'm being too general, but tell us about how you heal.
No, I understand that question. For me, the information comes in, it looks like screens. So if you go to the back of a Best Buy or a Walmart, you know how there's all those TV screens? And if I'm focusing on the screen in the center, that's you and I here talking. And then we've got at least 15 or 20 other screens going all the time that are transmitting data into me. So when I'm going into session, I just pay attention to the left side, right in front of my frontal lobe here on the left side is where most of my data comes in. And the psychic surgery works, I work on etheric template level of the auric field as well as astral plane. Plus, I mean, obviously physiologic. We hit it from every single level, but it's really expanding and then taking each layer of the field like one at a time to clear, balance, and realign. But psychic surgery is mainly on the template. Yeah.
You know, I've been working at both in my understanding and then actually in practice. I have this sense that a healer is able to return in the body to the original template before the glitch occurred. I haven't quite mastered how to make it happen, how to do it. I do believe, this is going to sound a little bit woo-woo, but I do believe the dragons know how to do it.
Oh, for sure.
And so I keep asking to be taught. But there's some call it in today's consciousness studies, and people who study that talk about the information field. But to me, there's a cellular, the way it was supposed to be. There's a programming that at the core of each of our cells that is the healed way to operate. You have that understanding. Can you explain how you see it or know it?
Absolutely. So the etheric template is going to be the fifth, I believe, layer of the auric field. And if you think of like an architecture like blueprint, it's that of the person, right? So to me, it just looks like rotating data and particles, but it's that person in their true form, which is an innate state of vitality, right? All systems functioning. And then we go through life, and life is lifey, and we all have this and that happen, and traumas and addictions and food and scrolling and all of the things. And what that does is it accumulates in the field, or undealt with or unresolved process or traumas, processes, programs, as well as karmic contracts and ancestral stuff. It just all gets bogged down in there, and that becomes dis-ease. And so the way that I look at it is we'll start with the outer layer of the auric field, usually fourth, fifth. We go way out to the seventh and beyond, but those guys are not really pertaining to the day-to-day of the human. So I like to deal with really like the day-to-day of like, what do you think? How's your body feel? How are your emotions? Like, what are your beliefs? Like, how do we get all in there? But we'll start on the outer layer of the field, and I start to assess and scan because I can see it, right? I can see if there's any holes, tears, or perforations in that outer layer of the field. Now, mind you, I've already telepathically drawn up that template of them fully healed. So I'm holding in my mind's eye right next to them as they're presenting both. You see that? And then what I'll do is I'll go layer by layer. So then I'll go from the outer layers, I'll do any suture work, take care of any holes or any tears or any leaks. And then usually it's clearing and debriding. So it's like taking a scrub brush to the wound of the auric field. People look like they're just off gassing, like plumes of smoke, or just releasing just like oil. It just like spills off the
Black
side.
tar, I've seen.
Black tar, and it's just
Yeah.
stagnant energy. There's nothing to even fear in it, but it's just like, all right, next, because we have to take it in stages to be maximally effective. So starting with the outer, then we'll do the debriding. So that gets me down more into the thought patterns and the emotional, right? Which is going to be however they're operating. And then we'll get into what they're up to. Like, what pills are you taking? What are you consuming? What are you actually doing? With zero judgment, because hey, like we're all up to something. We're doing the best we can, but how's it working for you? And then are you ready really to make a shift? And most people don't come to me until they are, right? Because I'm not the hand-holding healer type. I'm still very much the paramedic who's like going to pull you out of the ditch, be like, all right, let's go. But continuing to hold that, the fully vital self, the whole healed self, next to the current day presentation. and go from each layer all the way down into the molecular structure of the cells, right? And this is where the psychic surgery gets really intricate. So say we have a rape victim and that person now has cysts or fibroids or, bleeds, whatever's presenting. So we'll go through each organ system and we're balancing all of the energy of each organ system, and then we'll get into the most affected area. And usually it's just like tuning focus in is what it looks like to me, but ultimately it's taking a high pitched vibration into a dense ball of stuck energy. And that will start to open up, and the person will have a catharsis or a scream, or they'll throw up, or they'll do whatever they need to do to move that out before doing the quote repair work. So it does look like a Western surgery, but clearly I'm not physically operating on anyone. I'm working on the energetic. But because everything is energy, the underlying etiology of all matter is energy. If we know how to manipulate energy, we can be extraordinarily potent at like shifting. And so I advocate you play with that in terms of holding that vibration of total wellness and then playing with bringing those into more into balance. Does that make sense? And start with the outer layers and go all the way down into the cells. At least that's how I do it.
So you've developed, though, a disciplined stage by stage approach.
Yeah. It's just been over years and years of practice, and it's really my higher guidance. I didn't set out to become a psychic surgeon. I didn't even know what it was. But like after 15 years of 911, and then I did law enforcement chaplaincy during COVID. And once I got into energy healing and holistic healing, I naturally gravitated towards medical intuition. And then when I was guided to start putting my hands on people, like I got attuned to Reiki and all these different, little certifications. But all of a sudden it was like, boom, I had a team of surgeons, like front and center. And so
That was my next question. What beings are working with you?
Angels, light beings, and the surgeons. I've got these 3 surgeons. They're hugely omnipresent. They never talk. I've never in all of these years heard them say anything because and they stand in a really interesting shape. There's 1 in front and 2 that stand just behind. And they, from time to time throughout all of my years of meditation and shamanism, sometimes you come across beings that are so powerful. It's just like, oh my gosh, like what an honor. Woo, hello, and that's how I feel with them. I'm just like, happy to be here. Tell me what to do. And so they essentially come through and they'll come through my hands. And my hands will turn into lasers or suction or whatever it is that needs to be done. But they are guiding the entire thing.
It just was reminding me there was a psychologist who worked with mentally ill people and believed that they were energetically challenged or possessed, or and he has since passed away. But he had worked with a young man who was a medium, and a very powerful Chinese healer appeared and then worked through Andy, who's the medium, with Dr. Palmer guiding the session, working to clear, remove, and so it's interesting. I love to hear how you see it happening, because I think that's pretty neat.
It's been really beautiful to witness, and it's really amazing to watch people. And so again, it makes sense. All of everything I've ever been through made me a better paramedic, and now all of the paramedic stuff made me a better healer, because I've just got, it's like brick and mortar, and this super solid foundation and understanding of anatomy, physiology, clairvoyance, medical intuition, just all of these different mechanics, and then understanding the intricacy and the delicacy, because again, I'm still very much going down into the darkest crevices of humanity's psyche with people in their worst traumas, their worst moments. And that requires a tremendous amount of integrity, and so it's like hanging out with a lantern down in the cellar with them as they're going through. And it takes such courage for these people to like face off and soften and finally release, right? A lot of this stuff. So witnessing it and watching it move out and then watching them look 10, 15 years younger and 1,000 pounds lighter, it's like, oh man, how cool is that? It's so
Pretty
fun.
cool. So this might seem a little off topic, but you said something, going down into the deepest crevices. I feel, and you tell me what your take on this is, we've got so many people nowadays challenged with regard to the shadow side of humanity and challenged to the point where reality has kind of gone a little bonky. How have you seen that, if you've seen that energetically?
Oh, it's all over. So collectively, we all understand, regardless of belief structure, that things are shifting, right? And my understanding is that collectively we're shifting out of the old kind of Piscean masculine dark greed, lust, power era that's been for however many thousands of years into this like age of Aquarius. Makes me want to sing that song, but uh, more conscious, feminine, integrated. So we're in this really precarious contraction time where the old era is kind of completing. So it's getting extraordinarily dark and potent. Higher frequencies are coming into the earth. And again, to me, there's divine overlays. There's things playing out that are, thousands, multi-thousand year cycles, intelligences that are far bigger than we can even comprehend. And it's kind of a divine order. And down here, it's crunchy. Down here, it's chaotic. Down here, people are hitting the wall at 100 all around us, And what I'm seeing is it's kind of, decide time. Do you want to continue or do you want to opt out? And I'm seeing a whole lot of people that are opting out. And I can totally understand opting out through suicide, opting out through overdose, opting out through addictions, spiraling out.
So in my patients, what I'm seeing a lot of is all of a sudden, out of the blue, they're developing weird autoimmune, life-threatening cancers, life-threatening diseases. And I do understand sometimes I tell my friends in my spiritual community, many of whom are very much connected to celestial. I'm freaking in the swamp. I do my work in the swamp. And I see people getting illnesses that, they're not ready to handle. This is a rough time, this shift from the old stuff that's anchored in pretty deep and is fighting, doesn't want to let go, and the new stuff. And I can understand if people say, I don't want to stay. It's hard. It's hard work.
It's highly uncomfortable, and uncertainty is not something that's hugely palatable to a lot of people. And I totally get it. You know what I'm saying? And again, as somebody who's seen as much death as me, it's like, all right, I get it. So it's like shed the body, take off the heavy coat, hit the reboot button, and like take a rest and
Yeah,
chill, take a
yeah.
break. It's like, dude, I get it.
Okay, I'm ready. I'll come back another time. This one, not for me.
Right.
So,
This isn't that much. Yeah.
oh yeah,
But
it's.
it's
I
definitely
see it though. When COVID first hit, when I saw the number of young, healthy people get taken out, um, well, that was traumatizing as a physician. That was extremely traumatizing to not have no resources, all this fear, all this unknown, and nothing in my armamentarium to help. And, to see a guy who you know, hiked all the time, 49 years old, all of a sudden, boom, dead. I'm like, so it can be a rough path. But you know what I've sensed, and we talk about this in my spiritual community, and you tell me if you've sensed it. With all the influx of higher energies, there is, through all this spastic, chaotic, volatile reality rupture stuff, there's a current, a ribbon of new stuff that is underpinning. There's just a thread of this ease and flow and grace. Have you sensed that?
I have. I
Mhm.
have. And honestly, I've been doing shadow work personally for 20, 25 years. And so I'm actually thriving in this time. And I'm integrated in a lot of ways to be able to acclimate to the depths. And so I'm very well anchored. So I'm really starting to come into full bloom in this time. So it doesn't have to be hugely chaotic and destabilizing,
Mhm.
especially for those of us that have kind of been in this world for a while and, working on our stuff. And what I'm finding is there is this ease and there is kind of this, okay, I knew I was here. Like my dharma is to bridge the mainstream with the energetic and holistic, like you. So thank you so much for filling your dharma as well in this way and making this stuff make sense. And so here we are having these types of amazing conversations. And, it's like the lanterns, they just continue to flicker on as we, continue to have these types of conversations and put out consciousness in this frequency into the world.
You just said something that brought up an image. A couple years ago, I wrote a children's book, The Marigold Lantern.
Mm.
And I had this image, it was clear as anything, of the garden and the marigolds lighting up a path into nature with the elementals and the fairies all around. Anyway, it was like, whoa. So when
So,
you just said that, I had this feeling like we do have runway lights underneath all of the, don't let yourself be fooled by all the chaos and really, really look down because there are runway lights
mhm.
like the marigolds in the garden. And the way is going to more and more higher energies are coming in. I do believe there's an intelligence that is working it. And we are going to shift. And anyway, so when I can remind myself to get out of my triggers and look for the beauty. So
And
we have,
it may
go
be
ahead, sorry.
sorry, just it might be active participation, but like what can we each do today? And
Mhm.
so that's why, again, I just really advocate people live right now, today, burn the nice candles, eat the food, go on the trip, like, sleep in the nice sheets, do it now and
Mhm.
treat yourself to that experience because it doesn't all have to be harsh.
Yeah. So we only have about 2 or 3 minutes left. Um, First, thank you for being here. It was so wonderful to hang out and talk. Do you have any, other than live, just be present and live your life? Do you have anything else that you would tell people?
Absolutely. Remember your power always. You are your own greatest teacher and guru. And the more you bring your awareness back into self, the more you accept yourself, learn to ground, learn how to clear your energy field, learn about your gifts and sensitivities, and lean in to your abilities, the consciousness in the universe will unfold the path for you. So trust yourself above all and bring it back to self. Lean in and always remember your power.
I love that. And I'm going to add my corollary from a little bit more, perhaps shamanic approach. We get all this spiritual insight, and a lot of times we have all this energy coming into our upper chakras, but we don't have the confidence to fully bring it down into our bodies and manifest into living, into projects, into our creativity. And I think you're saying the same thing. Really bring that all the way through you. And that means, and you're going to correct me if I'm off here, be human. Don't fight it. Be human and bring this spiritual wisdom and inspiration into action as a human in the world. Because when
Oh,
you get that, yeah, doesn't that feel, I can feel I'm getting goosebumps. When
yeah.
you get that flow, um, you're going to feel empowered. You're going to be supercharged.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So well said. Perfect.
So, everybody, this is Sarah Grace, who's been with me tonight. It was wonderful talking with you. You can find her on Sarah, SARAHK SarahGrace.com. As you can tell by listening to her, she knows her stuff. She's a teacher, a healer. She can go down into the minutia, down into the molecular of you. She can help you get through any PTSD. This is a gift you bring the world, Sarah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for
So
having me.
nice. So glad you were here with us tonight. Emily, thank you. You've been listening to Maximum Medicine Radio with Doc Martin. Tune in next time while the doc talks health, spirituality, and the impact your beliefs have on every part of who you are, body and soul. Doc Martin unpacks the challenges we face as human beings and teaches callers to open the door between the scientific and the mystical. To learn more about Doc Martin and Maximum Medicine, visit www.sharonmartinmd.com.